Hello everyone. Tonight, we begin with a topic both scandalous and scholarly, the intimate, tangled, and sometimes downright strange world of medieval sex. It was the age of chivalry and questionable obal remedies, when foreplay often meant a polite greeting and a silent hope that no one was awake to notice. Before you sink into your warm blanket, take a moment to like this video and subscribe to Boring History for Sleep. But only if you truly enjoy what I'm doing here. Leave a comment too. Tell me where you're listening from and what time it is now. It's always fascinating to know we're connected from all corners of the world. Now then, dim the lights, let the fan hum softly, and come with me into a night of very old secrets. Picture a small house, thatched roof, rough wooden walls. Inside, a family of 3 generations lying side by side. Near the hearth, next to a few chickens, an old goat, and a cramped bed. For medieval people, night was not private time. It was when everyone and every animal sought warmth together. A husband and wife's intimacy was no longer just for them. It became an art of secrecy, hidden among the steady breathing of children and the occasional crow of a restless rooster. Can you imagine it? A couple wanting to whisper words meant only for each other, but having to watch the sharp eyes of a mother-in-law, the cough of a grandfather, and the goat's tail, always poking close to the bed in search of hay. That was the reality for most people in medieval Europe. No curtains, no locks, no true privacy. Everything depended on skill and a bit of luck. If they had to travel, things got trickier. Inns along the road had no private rooms, just large beds. Whoever arrived first lay down first. Whoever came later squeezed in. One bed could hold 3 people, 5 people, even 8 people. Whoever was tired slept. Whoever was drunk snored. Whoever wanted romance had to swallow sweet words deep into the night. Yet despite the inconvenience, people still fell in love, still needed each other, still found ways to keep love's warmth alive. Some couples slipped out to the fields, hid in horse stables, or found a quiet forest corner, just to hold hands, whisper a few words, then hurry back before dawn. They had no privacy, but they had courage and patience to nurture happiness. In the most suffocating conditions, the wealthier folk, nobles in castles, fared little better. Their beds had thick fur blankets, silk curtains hanging on 4 sides, but servants always waited right at their feet. One soft cough from the master brought hot tea, warm towels, and a pair of eyes, witnessing everything. A noble's night sometimes felt less free than a peasant's night in a straw hut. And if that wasn't complicated enough, the church added the final knot. They declared the sole purpose of the marriage bed was to produce children. Enjoying it too much was a sin. Doing it on holy days, an insult to God. Lent, Advent, Fridays, saints' feast days, every significant date was listed as forbidden. A loving couple had to check the church calendar first, before daring to hold hands. Yet still, people loved, found ways to bend the rules, laughed together in the dark, and brought healthy children into the world. History records countless wars, bloody thrones, but sometimes the greatest events began from a cramped corner of a bed, a small warmth, a glance held a moment too long, and a patience strong enough to turn darkness into hope. Tonight, you've seen how complicated the medieval bed could be. Tomorrow night, I'll tell you more about how the church turned bedrooms into courtrooms, the days strictly forbidden, and the quiet souls who braved it all, just to touch each other. Chapter 2. When the church held the bedroom key. Last night, we peeked inside a tiny medieval cottage. We saw how 2 lovers hid their whispers from kids, goats, and a drafty roof. But tonight we follow them deeper, to a place no bed could escape the shadow of the church. Back then, love was never just between two people. Every touch, every sigh, every moment under the blanket came with a question. Is this blessed, or is this sin? The church made sure you knew the answer. They taught everyone that sex was holy only when it made children. Pleasure for its own sake, dangerous. Enjoying each other too much, risky for your soul. So they gave couples a strict calendar. Sundays were for worship, not for passion. Fridays reminded people of Christ's suffering. So, no touching then either. Big holy days forbidden. Lent 40 days of total restraint. Advent, more waiting. Some places counted half the year as off limits. Imagine newlyweds marking their walls with secret signs, counting down to the next safe night. Imagine the hush in the village when someone broke the rule, and the gossip that followed, but forbidden days were only the start. The real fear was confession. Priests carried guides that listed questions to ask. Detailed, awkward questions a husband might be asked. Did you visit your wife too often? Did you crave her more than you prayed? Did you want her in ways you should not? A wife heard her share too. Did you tempt your husband on a holy night? Did you enjoy it too openly? Did you resist enough to stay modest? People confessed these things on their knees. They whispered secrets so personal, they dared not say them to anyone else. One slip of the tongue could double the sin. Lie to a priest, worse than lust itself. For small mistakes the punishment was light. Extra prayers, fasting for a day. Bigger sins meant money paid to the church, or even public shame. One old record tells of a bishop who scolded a noble couple. They shared their bed too often for his taste. Once a month was enough. He told them, any more was gluttony of the flesh. They bowed their heads. But who knows what they did when the bishop turned away? Not everyone obeyed. Human warmth laughs at iron rules. Farmers worked from dawn to dusk. Who could check where they slipped away under moonlight? In small villages, neighbors sometimes heard a squeaky bed, but pretended to sleep. Why stir trouble tomorrow? They might break a rule too. But nobles had sharper eyes on them. A lord's affair could start rumors that ruined a family. A queen pregnant during Lent, a scandal that could shake a kingdom. So wealthy lovers played careful games. Secret letters in Latin. Meetings in hunting cabins deep in the woods. Gold slipped to a trusted guard, so he turned his back at the right moment. Even abbeys and convents had cracks in their walls. A monk with a wandering heart. A nun who smiled too long at a travelling knight. Tales say a brave lover could slip into a convent at night, with silver for the doorkeeper. If caught, punishment was gentle for some, harsh for others. An abbot found with a widow might just be moved to a different monastery. Rules looked strong on paper. Real life was softer. People still sang songs of secret lovers. Troubadours travelled from castle to castle, singing about distant ladies and hidden kisses. Some songs were pure fantasy. Some covered real affairs with pretty words. Villagers learned to read between the lines. A sweet rhyme about a rose garden often meant a real tryst behind a stable. Despite so many restrictions, people still fell in love. Again and again, a man would risk the wrath of heaven just to feel his wife's hand on a cold night. A young maid would sneak a smile to a farm boy, even if it meant confession later. No priest, no bishop, no dusty rulebook could stop two hearts that wanted each other. Tonight, you see the other side of medieval life. The heavy hand of the church, yes, but also the secret laughter that escaped through bedroom walls. Tomorrow, I will take you closer to the lovers themselves. You will follow them behind a barn, through an orchard at night. You will hear the vows whispered so softly that not even the strictest priest could overhear. And maybe you will wonder, what would you do? Would you obey? Or would you break the rule for one stolen night of warmth? Close your eyes now, and think of this: rules can bind the body, but never the longing behind a heartbeat. And that truth, stronger than any confession, survived every sermon. Chapter 3. when secrets hid behind the barn and under the moon. Last night, you and I stood in the confessional shadow, listening to secrets whispered through wooden screens. Tonight we leave the church door behind. We follow the brave, the foolish, and the tender-hearted who refuse to let rules chain their hunger for touch. Imagine a village wrapped in dusk. Smoke drifts from a handful of thatched roofs. Somewhere behind a goat pen, two shapes slip past a squeaky gate. A boy, rough hands from the plough. A girl, hair braided in a hurry. They meet where the barn blocks the wind. She glances back at the sleeping cottages. He listens for the snore of her father through thin walls. The world is silent, but for the soft shuffle of straw beneath their feet. Here, they steal what the church calendar denies them. A quick kiss, a shy laugh, a promise whispered to last until the cock crows. These hidden moments were more common than any dusty record admits. Folk songs and village tales kept them alive long after the lovers turned to dust. Some sang of boys who promised marriage behind haystacks, then fled before dawn. Others told of girls who hid a child until a hasty wedding fixed what gossip could ruin. Behind every barn was 100 secrets. Under every orchard tree was proof that human longing didn't care for papal decrees. Of course, not every secret stayed hidden. Sometimes, a jealous neighbor saw too much and carried news straight to the priest. Sometimes, a father found a stranger's boots beneath his daughter's window. And sometimes the village court had to settle it all with fines, forced marriages, or shameful penance on Sunday morning. But love is a weed in cracked stone. The harder the village elders pulled at it, the deeper it rooted. Lovers learned to be clever. A young man might wait until the harvest festival, when wine blurred the line between dance and flirtation. A girl might slip a ribbon into his pocket. A quiet sign she'd meet him later behind the stables. Sometimes they shared more than kisses. Sometimes life grew in secret. And when a belly swelled, everyone knew it wasn't the Holy Spirit at work. Church laws named this fornication. Records show fines for it in nearly every medieval town. A first offense cost coins. A repeat offense might cost livestock. But a baby that cost a shotgun wedding. Yet for all the rules, villages were practical places. If two young fools had already tangled the bedsheets, it was better they wed than keep gossip alive. So parents arranged quick vows, a few blessings, and life went on among the nobles. However, the same slip could ruin entire dynasties. An heir born out of wedlock could split a kingdom. Families feuded over titles, lands, dowries. Secret lovers among lords and ladies had to hide 10 times more carefully than any peasant behind a barn. Did true love exist then? It did. But it was less about candlelit poems and more about surviving rumor and scandal. Some noble couples genuinely adored each other. Letters survive, stained by time, filled with clumsy Latin lines of longing. One knight wrote to his wife while campaigning far from home. He called her his heart's roof, his comfort against iron and blood. He begged her not to listen to court gossips who claimed he lay with other women. Maybe he did. Maybe he didn't. But he needed her forgiveness more than her belief. Not all unions were so gentle. Some families forced daughters to wed men twice their age. A girl might see her true love every day across the village square, but share a bed with a stranger she called husband. What could she do? Whisper a song to her real love when her husband snored. Slip him a gift at the market. Dream of a different life until her hair turned grey. Still, for all the pain and shame, people clung to stolen joy. A barn, an orchard, a stable, a moonly path. These were their private chapels of passion. No confessor, no lawman. No gossiping aunt could stand between two people determined enough to find each other in the dark. Tonight, you see how life twisted around the rules. Behind the sermons were giggles in the hay, Behind the threat of punishment was a kiss hidden by shadows. Tomorrow we follow these forbidden paths deeper. We will visit the inns, the roadside beds shared by strangers, where lust and loneliness mingled more freely than any priest would dare admit. Sleep now, with this thought warming your dreams. Even a barn can feel like a palace, if love breathes between its walls. And tomorrow, we open the door to yet another secret corner of medieval passion. Chapter 4. When an inn beheld strangers and secrets. Last night we slipped behind the barn. We heard the stolen laughter hidden under straw. Tonight, we follow those same footsteps down the road to a place even less private. The medieval inn. Forget the image of a neat guest room with a locked door. Most inns in medieval Europe were long wooden halls stuffed with travellers, traders, merchants and wandering souls looking for warmth more than comfort. Beds were rare. Space was precious. If you found a spot near the fire, you were lucky. If you got a straw mattress, look you still, but alone, almost never. A traveller might share a bed with a stranger or two, sometimes three. No one cared about snoring or smell. They cared about a blanket in winter and maybe a bite of hot stew, but closeness breeds more than warmth. In the creak of an inn's floorboards, secrets were whispered. Hands slipped where they shouldn't. Promises were traded for coins. And sometimes a weary heart found company for a night. For the church, inns were dens of temptation. Priests warned against travellers who slipped away from home and forgot their vows with a mug of ale and a wink from a serving girl. Records show countless fines for adultery, discovered in roadside inns. But for many, the road was freedom, far from village eyes and family walls. People tested boundaries they never dared at home. Imagine this. A merchant rode one, pockets jingling with coins, drinks too much mead. A maid brings him more bread, more ale, and a sly grin. They disappear behind a rough curtain. In the morning, the merchant claims he was robbed. Maybe he was. Maybe he paid more than he wanted. Or maybe he didn't regret a single silver coin if it meant forgetting the cold for one warm hour. Travelling nobles face temptation too. A young squire might be sent to secure lodging, but ends up tangled in a stable with a local girl. A knight might spend the night boasting to rough mercenaries, then slip to a bed that wasn't his own. The innkeeper saw everything but spoke little. A good innkeeper knew silence was gold. Gossip could bring angry husbands or jealous wives. Better to turn a blind eye and keep guests returning. Yet not every encounter was lust alone. The road connected lonely souls. A widow travelling to visit kin might share her grief with a kind stranger by the hearth. A shepherd far from his flock might find a fellow wanderer who made the dark road feel less empty. These fleeting bonds left no marriage record, nor priest's blessing, only memory, warmth under coarser blankets, and perhaps a tear when the dawn broke and the path called again. Church law frowned at this freedom. Moral codes demanded modesty even far from home. But moral codes rarely rode beside merchants when ale loosened tongues and desire found a crack in the knight's cold armour. Monks on pilgrimage were not free from rumour either. Chronicles tell of holy brothers caught in tavern beds, with women they swore to resist. Some were punished. Some bribed local priests to hush things up. The world turned, and the same sins repeated at the next village. Travellers accepted that inns were wild places. A bed meant safety from wolves, thieves, and icy roads. Sharing it meant accepting another's breath. Secrets and sins, as the price for warmth, behind every smoky hall was a tangle of stories. Some were tales of passion. Some were regretful moans in the dark. Some were quick agreements, no promises. No, guilt. Just a brief escape from the loneliness of medieval life. So when someone tells you the Middle Ages were cold and prudish, remember the inn bed. Remember the countless strangers who found more than sleep beneath coarse wool and the soft hush of snoring travellers. Tonight, we have left the village barn and followed the road to the bustling hearth of an inn. But tomorrow we turn back to the nobility. We slip behind castle walls, where silk sheets cover secrets more scandalous than any roadside affair. Close your eyes tonight, knowing that love, lust and loneliness know no locked door. They live wherever humans need each other most. And tomorrow, we will lift a velvet curtain to glimpse royal hearts, trapped by duty and desire alike. Chapter 5. When castle walls couldn't hide the fire inside. Last night, we huddled in a smoky inn, listening to footsteps and whispers in shared beds. Tonight, we climb higher, into stone towers and silk-draped chambers, where nobles played their own dangerous game of passion and secrecy. Castles were symbols of power, but inside those thick walls, hearts beat just as wild as any barn lover or roadside stranger. A lady in velvet skirts might look calm at the banquet, but behind her smile, she hid letters scented with rose oil. Words written for a knight who should never dare touch her. A young lord, married off at 15 to strengthen a family alliance, might find comfort in the soft arms of a lady in waiting, risking not just scandal, but swords drawn at dawn if a jealous husband found out. Marriage among nobles was rarely about love. It was about land, gold and peace between quarrelsome neighbors. A daughter traded like fine cloth. A son married off to tie kingdoms closer. Affection was supposed to grow later. If it didn't, each spouse found warmth elsewhere. Carefully, quietly, always pretending loyalty by day, while shadows hid betrayals by night. Servants were the silent witnesses. They knew who sneaked into which bedchamber. They carried secret notes, arranged stolen meetings, and sometimes took hush money to forget what they saw. But secrets leaked anyway. One slip of the tongue over too much wine. One maid fired for gossiping. One rival lord eager to spread rumors that might destroy a marriage or claim a throne. Even kings weren't safe from scandal. Chronicles whisper of queens with secret lovers, of bastard sons raised in quiet corners, of royal heirs whose bloodlines were far from pure. Some affairs were accepted if they were discreet. A powerful lord might keep a mistress in a separate wing of the castle, so long as he produced legitimate heirs with his wife. No one dared question him. A lady with charm could hide her heart's true keeper behind poetry and innocent glances during court dances. Songs praised her virtue, while her secret lover hid in a shadowed hallway, waiting for a single touch when candles went dark. Not all ended happily. Some stories ended in poison, slipped into a jealous husband's wine. Some ended in exile, when a scandal could not be contained. Some ended in quiet heartbreak. A lady wasting away, while her forbidden love rode off to war and never returned. Yet even under threat of ruin, passion burned bright. Troubadours wove these tales into verses sung before lords and ladies, who blushed but listened closely, seeing their own secrets mirrored in every rhyme. Beyond personal desires, court life itself tempted lovers to dance with danger. Feasts ran deep into the night. Goblets overflowed. Music blurred duty and longing. A careless step into the wrong chamber could bind two souls forever, or doom them both by dawn. A single rumor could shatter a fragile alliance. A hidden pregnancy could spark a war over inheritance. Yet the heart wants what it wants. No thick stone wall. No royal guard. No harsh sermon could stop stolen kisses hidden behind embroidered curtains. And when the worst came, when lovers were discovered, punishment varied. Some nobles dueled to defend a lady's tarnished name. Some lovers fled, abandoning titles and gold for freedom that cost them everything but each other. Others stayed, bowed to power, and endured cold marriages under watchful eyes, secretly reliving stolen moments when no one dared to look too closely. Tonight, you see that inside castles, silk sheets and gold rings meant little against the restless truth of human desire. Nobles risked thrones, riches and bloodlines just to feel alive for a single night. Chapter 6. When silent walls of monasteries held, whispers too. Last night, we peeked behind the velvet curtains of castles, where silk could not smother secrets. Tonight we go somewhere colder, holier, and for some, more dangerous to love the monastery and the convent. In the Middle Ages, many men and women chose to shut the world outside stone walls. Or sometimes, their families chose for them. A second son with no land was sent to the abbey. A daughter too pretty, too lively, or too costly to marry was given to the convent as an offering to God. Inside, they traded freedom for prayer, hunger for salvation, passion for silence. Or so the church hoped. Monasteries rose like fortresses of discipline. Daily life was ruled by bells, prayers, labor, and study. A monk rose before dawn, prayed until sunrise, worked the fields, or copied holy texts until dusk. Nights were for sleep or more prayers, not for dreams of flesh. Convents mirrored this routine for women. Nuns tended gardens, nursed the sick, taught children of noble families. Their days were meant to keep the body too busy to listen to the heart. But the heart is stubborn. Walls, vows and iron locks could not seal it forever. Historians still argue, were monks and nuns truly chaste? Some were saints in spirit and flesh alike. Others were only human. And humans grow lonely when the candles are snuffed and only the wind answers back. All let us hint a secret affection. Chronicles mention abbots who fathered children hidden with peasant mothers. Some convents gained bad reputations as places where noble daughters found freedom from arranged marriages and used their cells as hiding spots for forbidden trysts. One notorious abbess was said to keep a lover in disguise as a gardener. He tended more than roses. If the gossip was true, when caught, who vanished, she repented before her sisters and resumed her prayers. At least for a while. Even the rules themselves show a quiet confession that temptation lingered. Monastic codes warned monks to sleep apart, never two to a bed. They forbade confessions, whispered too long in dark corners. Some orders banned young novices from visiting certain corridors at night. If no one sinned, why write these rules at all? Not all stories ended in scandal. Some monks and nuns turned desire into devotion. They poured longing into illuminated manuscripts, writing love poems for God that read suspiciously like verses for a human beloved. Saints' biographies overflow with passion disguised as holy fervor. A young monk might pray for hours, not because his faith burned hotter, but because it was the only safe place to bury restless thoughts of a village girl left behind. Outside the cloister, villagers whispered about what really happened behind monastery gates. Some believed monks made secret tunnels to slip out at night. Some claimed children, born near abbeys, were no accident, but evidence that vows were as fragile as any village promise. Did the church punish these failures? Sometimes. A monk caught too many times might be exiled to a harsher monastery or forced into silence behind thicker walls. A nun with a swelling belly might face harsher judgment, even death, though more often she was quietly sent away to a distant priory, yet in secret. Life continued. Many turned a blind eye. Villagers relied on monasteries for charity and medicine. Lords gave land and gold to monasteries for prayers that supposedly washed their sins clean. Few wanted scandal to ruin the sacred illusion, so desire and discipline danced together. One step hidden in the library, one step murmured in the garden, when the prior looked away. Tonight you see that behind vows of chastity lay the same restless longing that lived in inns and castles and barns. The human need to touch and be touched refused to die. No matter how many candles flickered in chapel halls, tomorrow we step back outside these walls. We visit the herbalists and wise women who offered secrets to control life and death, to promise love, or to hide its consequences. There, Love and sin met roots and leaves, and whispered charms that terrified priests but comforted lovers. Close your eyes, knowing that even prayers cannot drown out the oldest language the heart knows. And tomorrow, we learn how a handful of herbs and a single whispered spell could change a lover's fate forever. Tomorrow, we leave royal chambers and slip back into the lives of simple folk. We will visit monasteries and convents, where passion was sworn away but never fully buried. There we find stories of locked doors that opened when prayers fell silent and longing rose like incense. Sleep now with this thought, no title. Knock round. No church decree can cage the heart forever. In every era, it finds a way to whisper, to touch, to burn. Chapter 7. When Herbs and Whispers Controlled Love and Life. Last night, we wandered through silent cloisters, where monks and nuns wrestled with secret longing under holy vows. Tonight we leave the echo of chapel bells behind and slip into the warm, earthy huts of the village, herbalists, the women and men who knew how to bend love, birth, and scandal with a handful of leaves and a whisper in the dark. In the medieval world, medicine and magic shared the same cup. A healer might bind a wound with honey and linen by day. Then by night, mix a potion to help a young wife delay a child she could not feed. For the church, this was dangerous ground. Healing the body was noble. Helping people dodge God's command to multiply was flirting with sin. But hunger and fear spoke louder than sermons. When another mouth to feed meant ruin, so herbalists learned to speak carefully. They knew which roots might cool passion, which seeds might stop a womb from quickening, which teas might soothe a girl's shame when her belly betrayed her secrets. Some methods were old, as the hill's wine boiled with special herbs, animal membranes tied tight in desperate hope, or charms buried under the doorstep to ward off unwanted life. A popular charm claimed that a woman could chew certain seeds while repeating a rhyme to keep her bed cold, even when her body burned for love. Did it work? Maybe. Maybe not. But when choices were few, a half-hope was worth a handful of coins. The church preached fiercely against such knowledge. Many priests thundered that stopping a child's spark was equal to murder. They called herbs and amulets tools of witches and the devil himself, yet demand never died. Peasant girls slipped coins into an old woman's apron and begged for silence. Wealthier wives, who feared the shame of an illegitimate child, sent discreet servants to buy bitter roots and quiet rumors before they reached the confessional. Stories say some herbalists paid dearly when caught. Accused of witchcraft, they stood in village squares, while neighbors whispered both curses and prayers for mercy. But behind closed shutters, the same neighbors prayed the next healer wouldn't vanish too. For every burned witch, 10 more learned to speak in riddles and hide their brews among harmless cures for fevers and toothaches. Secrets traveled faster than sermons. Not all uses of herbs were to prevent life. Many desperate hearts turned to plants for love itself. A boy wanting a girl's glance might carry a sachet of rosemary and thyme, hoping her eyes softened when he passed. Some old recipes promised a love potion, wine warmed with honey, stirred with a sprig of mint, a drop of sweat, and a single whispered name. Did it bend a maiden's will? Maybe not. But it gave shy lips courage to speak. And sometimes that was magic enough. Of course, love charms sometimes backfired. One tale tells of a jealous wife who slipped her husband a powerful brew to bind his passion to her alone. He drank, grew sick, and died before dawn. She claimed it was poison from an enemy. But the village never truly believed her innocence. These secret arts did more than tangle lovers' fates. They shaped entire families. A noblewoman too tired of bearing child after child might pay dearly for a trusted herbalist's help, risking both her soul and her inheritance, if discovered. Yet without these hidden hands, many families might have crumbled under too many mouths and too little bread. In this way, herbs kept more than secrets. They kept survival itself. Tonight you see how love, fear, and whispered magic coiled together like roots in dark soil. The church called it wicked. But in the flicker of a peasant's candle, it was simply another tool to hold life's storms at bay. Tomorrow, we leave the village huts and follow desire to the city's edge, to the brothels the church scorned but often taxed. There we see how medieval folk bought, sold, and sometimes found moments of strange tenderness, where sin and survival met behind painted doors. Sleep now with this thought. Sometimes a single leaf hidden under a bed can speak louder than any priest. And tomorrow, we open another locked door in this restless world of medieval love. Chapter 8, where sin were a price and a smile behind city walls. Last night, we sat by the hearth of an old village healer and listened to secrets mixed with herbs and hope. Tonight, we walk the crooked streets of a medieval city and stop at a door painted red. A place where rules bent easily and sin came with a coin and sometimes a smile. In medieval towns, brothels were not hidden in shadows. They stood openly on certain streets, often near city gates or river docks where sailors and traders poured in with gold and loneliness in equal measure. Town councils allowed them for a reason. Better to let desire roam in a few known houses than to risk chaos in the streets or scandal among respectable wives. Some rulers even taxed these houses, calling it a necessary evil to keep peace and coffers full. Inside, a brothel candles flickered over rough wooden beams and cheap linen beds. Women worked not in silks but in gowns, easy to slip aside. They laughed at drunk apprentices, teased visiting merchants, and sometimes shared a quiet word with knights who had more gold than virtue. For the church, brothels were proof of human weakness, yet they rarely shut them down completely. Closing a brothel did not kill desire. It just pushed it deeper into darker corners, harder to watch, harder to tax, and harder to confess. Records show some priests secretly owned the very houses they condemned from the pulpit. They collected rent with one hand and lifted holy bread with the other. Hypocrisy has never gone out of style. Not all who worked there did so by choice. Some women chose it as the best bad option when widowed or abandoned. Some were sold into the life by desperate parents. Some were tricked by sweet promises of city jobs that ended behind a locked door. Yet within these painted walls, friendships grew between the women. They warned each other of rough men. They shared food, small gifts, and gossip about the powerful men who visited in secret. Clients came from every class. An apprentice with a single coin might buy a quick moment of warmth. A wealthy merchant might pay for a night pretending he was a lord with a loyal mistress. A bored noble might keep a favorite girl for weeks, gifting her ribbons, perfume, and secrets that could ruin him if told. Sometimes, real affection flickered to life amid the trade. A prostitute and a regular client might form a bond, half love, half habit. Some stories even tell of men freeing their lovers, buying them a small house, and marrying them when scandal allowed. Medieval laws regulated these houses, more than churches sometimes did. Brothels paid taxes, underwent health inspections of a sort, and kept order through hired guards. Fights and thefts happened, but for many men, these places felt safer than chasing a farmer's daughter and risking a father's pitchfork. Poets and songwriters mocked brothels in verse, yet behind the mockery they hinted at truth. Love for sale was not always loveless. A weary soldier might find a gentle touch he hadn't felt in years. A lonely old merchant might trade silver for a night where someone called him beloved, even if only until dawn. For the women, life behind the red door was harsh, but sometimes more free than a poor marriage. In the brothel, they earned coin, kept some secrets, and chose which man to smile at and which to reject when the madam allowed. When plague struck or war raged, brothels emptied fast. Disease turned warm rooms into silent tombs. Some women fled back to villages if they could. Others died unburied, forgotten by those who once wept at their bedside. Yet when peace returned, so did demand. Sin is stubborn, and so is hunger. New faces took old places, and the red door swung open again. Tonight you see that medieval people did not hide desire as well as sermons claimed. Behind every cathedral bell was a street where laughter and sighs proved rules were easy to break when the heart and the coin agreed. Tomorrow we step out of the city and back into the countryside, where marriage was less passion and more bargain. There we see how families traded daughters for cow's land, and the promise that no feud would start over a stolen cabbage again. Sleep now with this thought. Not every love is pure, not every sin is wicked. In the end, all hearts crave warmth, and find it wherever the world allows or sells it. Chapter 9, where a wedding was a contract and love came later. Last night, we wandered down narrow city lanes and peered behind painted doors where passion wore a price and a passing promise. Tonight we leave the red lights and step into the daylight of village life, where love was rarely the reason for a wedding, and a bride was more often a bridge between families than a partner for romance. In the medieval countryside, marriage was a transaction before it was a bond of hearts. A daughter might be promised to a neighbour's son before she had her first tooth, if it meant two farms would share a well and avoid fighting over grazing sheep. When children reached their early teens, parents gathered around a wooden table and haggled details like a market deal. How many cows would the bride bring? How much linen? How many acres would the groom's father promise in return? Once agreed, it was hard to undo. Breaking an engagement could spark revenge, a feud, or worse, a local fight that outlived the couple themselves. For peasants, practical matters ruled over feelings. A good husband needed strong arms, a patch of fertile soil, and enough tools to keep the roof from falling in. A good wife needed skill with cloth bread and firewood, and a reputation for keeping secrets, not stirring them at the village well. Among the nobles, the stakes were higher. A marriage could end a war-merged kingdoms or protect a throne from hungry cousins with swords. Kings played matchmaker, not just for sons and daughters, but for cousins, nephews, and distant kin. Sometimes a young prince found himself betrothed to a princess. He had never seen her name more valuable than her smile. She might arrive with trunks of gold and an army at her back, but no promise that she would ever warm his bed willingly. Romance, when it came, usually came later. Some couples grew fond of each other with time chores and shared children binding them tighter than wedding vows alone. For others, fondness never bloomed, and they learned to live politely side by side while their hearts wandered elsewhere. Yet people are people. Behind every arranged match were glances stolen at a harvest fair, or shy meetings by a riverbank. Young hearts still dreamed, even when parents whispered about land deeds instead of poetry. Some stories tell of lovers who refused to obey family deals. They fled together across muddy roads to distant villages where a sympathetic priest might wed them before an angry father caught up. Sometimes love triumphed, and families forgave. More often, the couple was dragged back home, shamed, and sometimes punished so harshly that the next generation learned to keep passion tucked safely behind duty. Wedding celebrations themselves mixed joy with watchful eyes. Guests feasted, danced and drank barrels of ale, but behind laughter, neighbours judged whether the match was fair, the dowry honest, the union blessed. A bride blushed, not because of romance but because so many people waited to see if her virtue was true. In some places, newlyweds were escorted to bed, while songs mocked and teased from outside the door, a rough guarantee that no one would claim the marriage wasn't real. Noble weddings were even more public. Royal scribes recorded every vow, every dowry chest, every whispered rumour. A single scandal could unravel a fragile treaty and send knights back to bloodied fields. One princess wept as she crossed a sea to marry a prince. She feared. Her father said peace, demanded her tears. The court poets turned her story into a ballad of sacrifice sung by minstrels for years afterward, as if a pretty song could soften a wasted life. Still hope survived, stubborn as weeds between stones. Some peasants found sweetness in everyday loyalty, a wife who brought warm broth when the frost bit hard, a husband who sang softly while fixing the roof. Among the powerful, some arranged couples grew to trust and even cherish each other, sharing secrets no court gossip could guess. These rare loves were whispered as proof that sometimes fate was kind, even in a world where marriage was more bargain than bond. Tonight you see that weddings in the Middle Ages were tools to bind fields, kingdoms, and grudges. not always hearts. Yet hearts have their own will, and where duty ruled passion often slipped through the cracks, like sunlight through thatch. Tomorrow we stand before a mystery more thorny than marriage, the tangled myth of the chastity belt, a story half truth, half legend, that says more about fear and control than it does about real iron and keys. Close your eyes, knowing love may bend to duty, but it rarely bows for long. In barns, castles, brothels, or beneath a simple roof, it finds a way to bloom where no contract can stop it. Chapter 10. The Iron Myth That Never Locked a Heart. Last night we sat among wedding feasts and quiet tears where love bowed politely to duty and dowries, weighed more than whispered promises. Tonight, we turn to a tale hammered into so many imaginations, yet barely into real iron. The legendary medieval chastity belt. Picture this. A brave knight kisses his wife goodbye before riding to the Holy Land, sword shining cross on his shield. Before he goes, he locks a metal belt around her waist to guard her virtue while he's gone for years. He takes the key. No lover, no thief, no curious servant can slip past this armor of fidelity. It sounds dramatic. It fills pages of romantic novels and bawdy plays. But peel back the legend, and what remains is mostly rumor jokes and a few rusty museum curiosities made long after the so-called Age of Chivalry. Medieval records are suspiciously silent about real belts strapped to real women. No merchant advertised such a device. No law punished misuse of them. No church decree blessed or banned them. For something so scandalous and controlling, the Middle Ages left very few traces that chastity belts were everyday tools. Most examples we have today come from the Renaissance and Victorian eras, times fascinated by the idea of a lustful Middle Ages needing harsh iron to tame wicked wives. Some belts were crafted as moral warnings, displayed like grim jokes at court or fairgrounds to mock cuckolded husbands. Others were likely fakes made for collectors centuries later, eager to believe that knights chained their wives like livestock while riding to battle. Think practically. Medieval hygiene was basic at best. Daily baths were rare. Soap was precious. Water was cold and questionable. Imagine adding a locked metal cage between your legs for months or years. Infection would kill faster than any hidden lover, and who would open it for childbirth or emergencies when the knight was far away fighting Saracens or drinking with squires? 3 countries over, the myth crumbles under its own weight. So, if real belts were rare, what kept fidelity in place? Fear-shame neighbors with big ears, and priests with nosy questions. A wife risked far more than iron punishment if caught straying. Gossip alone could cost her dowry, children, or life if an angry husband demanded brutal justice. And more than fear, there was simple practicality. Many noble women stayed chaste, not for love, but to protect family, honor, and inheritance. A child from another man could break alliances, shatter peace treaties, and start wars no knight could win with a sword. The belt story survived because it tickles the imagination. It paints the past as savage and suspicious, a time when men trusted iron more than vows. Plays and jokes loved to poke fun at foolish husbands and clever wives, who found secret ways around a lock no blacksmith could outsmart. Renaissance poets winked at hidden keys and locksmiths bribed in the dark. Victorian moralists displayed fake belts to shame modern girls who danced too freely. But behind the myth lay a truth harder to laugh at. Medieval women had little control over their own bodies. Their chastity was not just a personal virtue, but a public asset guarded by fathers, husbands, and the church. If a woman broke the invisible belt of duty, she paid in blood and shame, far more cruel than any iron band. Tonight, you see that the chastity belt is less a relic and more a symbol, a heavy joke that says more about later centuries' fears than real medieval bedrooms. The real chains were gossip, watchful eyes, and the cold weight of family honor. Tomorrow we peek behind another curtain, one not locked but wide open, the legalized world of medieval brothels, where towns allowed sin to flourish in order to protect the innocent and fatten the tax box. Sleep tonight, knowing that trust and fear have always been stronger locks than iron. And even the tightest belt, real or imagined, cannot stop a heartbeat determined to love in secret. Chapter 11. where the town kept sin in check and coins flowing. Last night, we unfastened the rusty myth of the chastity belt and found that the real prisons of medieval women were shame and watchful neighbors, not cold iron keys. Tonight we step back into the city, but this time not behind the red door of one house, but down entire streets where pleasure was legal. Sin wore perfume, and the town itself collected its share. In many medieval cities, brothels were not shadows to hide, but places to manage human desire. Authorities reasoned that men denied a safe outlet might chase wives and daughters, bring shame on families, and spark fights in churchyards. So councils licensed brothels. They charged taxes for each bed, each girl, each jug of ale, poured beside whispered deals. Money fed city walls, paved roads, funded feasts for visiting nobles. Vice turned into civic benefit. Brothels had rules. Some towns required them to stand only outside city walls, or near river docks, far enough that good wives felt safe, but close enough that sailors, merchants, and lonely knights could find comfort before riding on. The women inside had to pass crude health checks, though no doctor of real skill wasted time on the poor. They paid the madam her cut. Then, the city, its tax. In return, they got a bed, warm food protection from violent clients or pimps who lurked in darker alleys. Some cities even appointed an official keeper of public women. Imagine that job on a medieval resume, the man responsible for counting beds and settling disputes between jealous clients and drunken soldiers. Church preachers condemned it all from pulpit steps. They roared that no soul could buy purity with a handful of coins after a night behind a painted door. Yet even monasteries sometimes owned property leased to brothel keepers. Gold has a way of silencing holy protests. For the women working there, life balanced on a blade. Some chose this path freely, after losing a husband or fleeing farm life too harsh to bear. Some were born into poverty so deep that selling a night of warmth fed their siblings for a month. Others were tricked, kidnapped, or sold by desperate families. Once inside, few escaped easily. Debts grew, fines appeared. From nowhere, the madam's smile hid iron rules about running away. Yet within walls painted red, or marked with a lantern, friendships bloomed. Older women taught younger ones which clients to trust, which guards could be bribed, which priests might forgive certain confessions for a share of secrets. Not all clients came for lust alone. A traveling merchant far from his village might spend coin just to feel a soft voice, call him kind, a gentle hand, smooth his worry lines for one night. A lonely knight might whisper stories of battlefield ghosts to a woman who pretended to listen but sometimes truly did. Even here in places, condemned as dens of sin, human warmth found cracks in rough walls. Some girls fell in love with regulars. Some men dreamed of rescuing a favorite, paying her debts, buying her freedom, and marrying her despite scandal. A few succeeded more often. Both hearts broke when dawn scattered secrets like spilled wine. The town turned a blind eye, so long as payments came on time. If trouble stirred a violent brawl, or a disease scareguard stormed in for show, fines were paid, repairs made, then doors reopened by sunset. For all the talk of moral decay, these streets kept other streets safer. Better sin corralled than roaming free neighbors, whispered as they walked past a brothel's flickering lantern. Tonight you see a truth older than any cathedral stone. Human craving can be hidden, beaten, fined, or prayed over, but it rarely disappears. Medieval cities learned to leash it with laws and ledgers, turning shame into silver. Tomorrow, we walk away from city streets, back to quiet village paths. There we find lovers, who neither paid nor sold, but risked gossip and penance for a stolen kiss behind the hedgerow, where the night kept their secret better than any lock. Sleep now with this thought. In every age, in every hidden room, love and loneliness find a way to meet, even when the world demands they stay apart. Chapter 12. Where the village hid lovers in the dark. Last night we traced the streets where coins bought sin, and lawmen nodded, as long as taxes were paid. Tonight, we leave crowded brothels and city guards behind, and return to muddy village lanes, where true scandal bloomed quietly under hedges and behind creaking barn doors. In every medieval village, Eyes watched everything. A stray glance at the market could spark gossip by sunset. A girl seen too often by the river with a certain boy meant whispers in church and pointed questions from her father before supper, yet rules and rumours could not smother young hearts. Lovers met where no candle burned, to betray them behind haystacks, under orchard trees along fences, where cows dozed, unaware of secrets spilled in whispers. For many peasants, life left little time for romance. Fields demanded sunrise, labour animals needed, tending storms, destroyed roof and crop alike. By night, bodies ached for sleep, more than for poetry. But even the weariest found stolen moments. A boy might climb through a shutter, while his sweetheart's family snored. They might share breath and warmth on a straw bed, too narrow for secrets, yet wide enough for reckless promises. Neighbours often guessed. Thin walls did not hide soft laughter or the squeak of boards at midnight. Some turned away, choosing to remember that love was sometimes the only joy in hard seasons. Others threatened scandal, hoping to earn favours or bribes for silence. When gossip reached the village priest, the lovers risked more than angry parents. Church law named their secret as fornication. For the first offence, fines or penance might suffice. Repeat, trouble could mean public shame, kneeling barefoot at the church door, or standing before the congregation while whispers burned hotter than any sermon. Yet many took the risk. They believed love worth more than coins or whispers. Some turned stolen kisses into hasty weddings forced by growing bellies, impossible to hide, once spring flowers bloomed. A forced wedding solved scandal, but not always sorrow. Some couples who fled village rules found kindness with a wandering priest, willing to bless their vows for a chicken or a promise of labour. Others returned home, hoping forgiveness would follow once a child's wail filled the cottage. For girls, the risk lay heavier. A boy might vanish to another village, or join a passing army, leaving behind only stories and shame. A girl carried proof in her belly, and faced gossip that never fully died, even if she later wed another. So mothers taught daughters tricks, whispered herbs, teas and prayers, to delay what might come too soon. The church condemned these secrets, yet mothers chose survival over sermons when a family already teetered on famine's edge. Still love survived. A single flower tucked in a braid, a song hummed near a field path, a promise scratched with a knife on a barn beam. These small gestures carried more passion than noble courts dripping silk and gold. Some village ballads outlived the lovers who inspired them. Songs of two young hearts who ran from angry fathers hid in a forest and built a rough hut where they dared to love each other until found or forgiven. Not every tale ended sweetly. Some ended with a broken heart, staring at an empty road, waiting for a promise that never returned. Some ended with an old woman alone by her hearth, still singing the tune of her youth, when the barn door was her chapel, and the moon, her only witness. Yet these quiet stories remind us of a truth, plain as mud and starlight. Love does not belong to kings or priests alone. It finds root in poor soil, grows under watchful eyes and blossoms best when no one thinks to forbid it. Tonight we rest here, among village hedges and mossy fences, where stolen kisses taste sweeter than gold, and two hearts brave enough to break rules remind us that passion belongs to everyone, rich or poor, watched or free. Tomorrow, we return to the stone halls of the powerful. We will meet queens and noble daughters, whose virtue was not guarded by hedges, but by politics, knives and treaties. Their secrets, if revealed, could shake kingdoms far beyond a village's gossip. Sleep now with this thought. A barn's creak or a prince's vow makes no difference to a heart determined to love and risk all for one more secret breath in the dark. Chapter 13. Where royal secrets could topple crowns. Last night, we lingered in moonlit fields where village lovers risked gossip for a taste of warmth. Tonight, we climb stone steps again, stepping into grand chambers where passion was not just scandal, but dangerous politics that could topple thrones and redraw borders with one whispered confession. A noble woman's virtue was no private matter. For queens and princesses, purity was a currency traded at the highest tables of power. A child in her womb carried the weight of alliances, kingdoms, and peace or war between rival lords. One wrong father, one secret lover, and a crown might shatter like glass under a boot. In royal courts, every glance was watched. Servants hovered behind silk curtains. Scribes recorded movements. Rival families bribed chambermaids to spy. A queen's chamber was never empty, a lady in waiting at her feet, a guard outside the door, and behind them all, a court whispering suspicions before the candle smoke even faded. Yet human hearts grow reckless under suffocating crowns. A lonely queen might find solace in a loyal knight, a court poet, or a favored squire. Some stories are legend, others painfully real. One famous tale tells of a French queen whose laughter at court masked letters exchanged with a handsome page. When rumors swirled, the king's advisors demanded proof to protect royal bloodlines. Servants were tortured, pages disappeared, but the queen denied everything. Years later, when her official son grew to look nothing like the king, court historians conveniently painted him as a bad ruler, a subtle punishment for sins no one dared prove. In England, a princess married off for peace, with a rival king fell for her husband's trusted knight. The affair fed enemies with gossip and blackmail. When war returned, her loyalty was questioned at sword point, her lover executed for treason, and she was locked away behind monastery walls to pray for forgiveness the rest of her days. Sometimes even kings risked their crowns for passion. One royal lord ignored treaties and wed a woman far below his rank. Ignoring all arranged matches, nobles revolted. Alliances crumbled. Yet he refused to set her aside. When he died young, poets wept over a love stronger than duty. While historians scolded him for putting a woman above a kingdom, these scandals rarely stayed locked behind castle gates. Minstrels turned them into songs. Villagers traded versions at firesides. And enemies twisted every rumor into weapons sharper than any dagger. A queen accused of infidelity could lose her crown, her children, and sometimes her head. A princess whose secret pregnancy was revealed risked being married off to a distant count as punishment, far from any child that might stain her father's name. Yet despite the danger, royal lovers existed in every century. Letters survived, hidden between pages of prayer books, poems scratched in Latin verses, praise forbidden lips and stolen nights, when duty slept and longing ruled. Some queens carefully arranged for trusted maids to guard doors, pass messages, or escort a secret guest through back corridors. No guard dared question. When such affairs succeeded, they left behind whispers and maybe a child carefully disguised as legitimate, raised to inherit lands, or even a throne built on a lie. No historian could fully erase. Church and crown waged endless war against such betrayals. Some courts forced queens to undergo humiliating purity inspections before and after marriage. Some kings banished wives for mere suspicion, locking them in distant towers where rumors grew stronger than any truth. But the heart, even royal, laughs at iron locks. Desire slips through corridors, hidden behind tapestries. In gardens lit by moonlight, in verses passed under heavy goblets, during feasts where eyes meet over roasted boar and goblets of wine. Tonight, we see power itself bending to passion. Thrones tremble, not under armies alone, but under the quiet rustle of silk when love crosses lines drawn in blood and gold. Tomorrow, we leave these royal halls once more and turn our eyes to the village market, where rumors spread faster than plague and gossip could ruin a girl before she ever dared a kiss. There we discover how a single whisper held more power than any knight's sword. Sleep now with this truth in your heart. No crown, no scepter, no royal seal can bind the wild longing that makes fools of kings and martyrs of queens. In silk chambers or village barns, love writes its own hidden laws. Chapter 14, where gossip travelled faster than plague. Last night, we tiptoed through castle halls, where one secret kiss could end a dynasty. Tonight, we stand in the heart of a village market, where secrets need no velvet curtain. Here, a single loose tongue does more damage than any sword and rumour, spreads quicker than fleas on a rat. In the medieval village, news was not printed or broadcast. It was carried in baskets, with fresh eggs traded along muddy lanes, whispered under breath as neighbours weighed cabbages. Gossip was the true currency of daily life, and everyone paid or profited in turn. A girl caught laughing too closely with the miller's boy risked her name long before any sin was proven. A young widow, seen too often at a stranger's door, faced pointed questions at Sunday Mass. No priest or king could keep pace with sharp tongues wagging over fences, and at the village well, sometimes gossip protected. A hint that a wandering beggar looked at children too long kept him moving to the next town. Whispers of a dishonest merchant saved villagers from spoiled grain or short measures at the scales. But more often, rumour was a net trapping young hearts and fragile dreams. Two lovers hidden behind a barn wall might escape a father's eye, but not a busybody, aunt who needed something fresh to feed the market chatter. Church courts depended on this gossip. Moral officials did not patrol every bed or barn, but villagers made sure no secret stayed buried. A couple accused of fornication could face fines or forced marriage if a nosy neighbour or jealous rival told the right tale to the priest. Records survive, listing every slip of virtue village scribes could catch. Names etched beside sins, sometimes invented, often exaggerated, and always interesting enough to keep the local scribe busy. For girls, the danger was sharpest. A boy might brag and walk away. A girl carried the risk alone in her belly and her future. Even an innocent conversation could ruin chances at a good marriage if rumours claimed her heart wandered before the wedding vows were spoken. A father's anger, a brother's shame, a mother's tears, all could follow one careless evening behind the hedgerow. Some families paid fines quickly to hush scandal. Others sent daughters to distant relatives until gossip died down. Yet for all its cruelty, gossip was also entertainment. Long winters and short harvest days left villagers hungry for drama, not their own. Who better to talk about than the neighbour's daughter caught with straw in her hair, or the old widow who remarried suspiciously soon after her husband's sudden death? These tales grew with each telling. A stolen kiss became an orgy. A secret birth became witchcraft. A love song, hummed in a barn, became a pact with the devil himself. Some found power in rumour. A clever woman who knew how to steer gossip could ruin a rival's chance at marriage, or push a stubborn father to approve a match by spreading sweet stories about a boy's virtues, whether he had them or not. Elders warned children to mind their tongues, but even they could not resist leaning over a neighbour's fence to swap a juicy secret for a fresh piece of cheese. The church thundered from the pulpit that gossip was a sin. Confessionals brimmed with villagers whispering apologies for words they had spread last market day. But come Monday, the same tongues wagged again. Perhaps gossip was less a sin and more a survival skill, in a world with no letters, no courts, quick to protect the powerless, and no privacy, except what you could hide behind silence and hard work. Tonight, you see that the smallest village could feel like a cage of eyes and ears. Desire was risky not just because of priests and fathers, but because a rumour once unleashed was harder to chase than a fox through bramble. Tomorrow, we rise above roofs and hedges to watch how plague, famine, and war turned desire from pleasure to necessity and sometimes desperate barter for warmth when hope itself lay dying. Their passion met fear, and sometimes hope bloomed in the darkest fields. Sleep now with this thought. Words carry weight heavier than iron, and sometimes it is not love that binds or breaks a heart, but the thousand whispers that follow it through every crooked lane. Chapter 15, where plague and war tested the bonds of desire. Last night we stood in the village square where gossip could ruin reputations before dawn's first rooster crowed. Tonight we step into darker days when gossip gave way to silence because the dead filled the streets faster than rumours could chase them. This is where love tangled with plague, famine, and war. where survival and passion danced a bitter waltz. When plague struck a village, it did not knock politely. It swept in with fleas and rats, unseen breath on the wind. Whole families vanished within a week. Doors were marked with chalk crosses. Priests stumbled from house to house, muttering last rites over bodies already cold. Amid this horror, desire did not vanish. It changed shape. Some people fled. All comfort, fearing touch itself, could carry death. Others clung to warmth wherever they could find it. A hurried embrace in a barn, a desperate night with a neighbor once ignored. Chroniclers wrote that during plague years, moral walls fell like rotten fences. Wives betrayed husbands. Husbands took mistresses, openly. Priests and nuns abandoned vows because tomorrow might never come. If death waited outside, why sleep alone? Some survivors judged them sinners. Others envied them, because while the righteous prayed, the desperate loved, and when plague took them, they left no regrets locked behind shuttered windows. War carried the same poison for hearts. When soldiers marched into villages, they left children behind, women weeping for husbands, forced to carry spears instead of plows. In war camps, women followed armies as wives, mistresses, or simple barter for bread. Not all were willing. Some found themselves dragged along with no choice. But among the camp followers, many chose freely, because a soldier's tent was safer than famine's cold grip in an empty cottage. Soldiers themselves, hardened by bloodshed and hunger, sought comfort where they could pay or beg it. A stolen kiss before a dawn raid, a soft voice in a muddy tent, reminding them of home. Sometimes these fleeting bonds saved lives. A camp follower might warn her lover of ambush or poison in his cup. A soldier might hide his beloved under spare armor during a retreat, hoping arrows would find him first. Medieval chronicles skip these quiet moments of mercy. They count the dead, not the soft words that kept a man fighting. One more day. After plague waves and war columns came famine. Crops failed, when too few hands remained to work the fields. Bread cost more than silver. Parents begged the church for mercy, while children starved in plain sight. Even here desire flickered. Young girls were married off quickly, so families might share resources. Widows remarried faster than churches approved, sometimes within days of a husband's burial. Love was not romantic. It was a desperate pact against hunger. In cities, rumors grew that famine bred sin. Women were said to sell themselves for a crust of bread. Men traded daughters to creditors rather than lose their tiny plots of land. Priests thundered about moral decay, but their words fed no empty stomach. Yet hidden beneath this bleakness lay quiet acts of true devotion. A starving husband giving his last bite of stew to his wife. A girl refusing a rich merchant's advances because she would not trade her body, even if it meant dying hungry. In these moments, the line between lust and love blurred. Survival demanded closeness, but the heart still sought warmth, not just flesh. Some folk clung to faith. Others clung to each other beneath tattered blankets, while the world outside their door turned to ash and bones. When plague faded and war moved on, life stumbled back. Weddings resumed. Babies were born in huts, rebuilt from ruin. Songs returned to village firesides about the brave boy who married the plague widow, about the young lovers who survived war's shadow and found joy in simple bread and soft beds once more. Tonight, you see how the darkest chapters of history pressed desire into corners where it became both salvation and curse. When fear stalked, every lane love did not die. It adapted. It clung to breath, while death scraped at the door. Tomorrow we rise from this sorrow and look again at the courts where passion wore masks of poetry and songs of courtly love, disguised longing too dangerous to speak aloud. There we find knights and ladies dancing a game as risky as any battlefield duel. Sleep now with this truth. Even when plague blackened the sky and soldiers trampled the fields, human hearts refused to freeze. They burned brighter than fear, and sometimes brighter than reason itself. Chapter 16, where courtly love turned desire into dangerous poetry. Last night, we crouched in plague-ridden huts and war-torn camps, where love clung to life like ivy on a burned wall. Tonight, we step back into candlelit halls, where nobles turned longing into an art form, so pretty and so perilous that poets still sigh over it centuries later. Welcome to the age of courtly love. In the courts of medieval Europe, especially in France and parts of Italy and England, love was polished into ritual. Troubadours sang songs of impossible passion, knights vowed loyalty to ladies far above their reach, and noble women smiled behind jeweled veils, knowing their favor made men risk blood and scandal alike. But courtly love was a game with sharp edges. A married lady might choose a young knight to be her champion. He would wear her colors on his lance in a tournament. He might fight duels, whisper poems, and sneak glances during dances, yet they were never to cross a certain line. The lady's virtue stayed locked in marriage, even as her heart played with stolen verses. In theory, in truth, many did cross the line. Poets hint at knights stolen in garden alcoves, letters hidden beneath silken pillows, sighs pressed into necks when no chaperone watched too closely. Troubadours turned these stories into verses. A single poem could lift a knight's fame or destroy a lady's reputation, if too many verses hinted that her smiles were more than polite. Kings tolerated this poetry because it flattered courts as refined places where love was not crude but elevated. No village haystack here, only roses and rhyme, yet gossip thrived. Some queens became legends for too many champions. Some knights were banished when their poems turned too honest. A careless line could be more lethal than a sword swing. The rules of courtly love pretended to protect women. A lady was to command her lover's loyalty without giving him more than words and maybe a touch of her sleeve. She was adored, not possessed, but power cuts both ways. A clever lady could bind a brash young knight to her side, making him her tool against rivals. A foolish knight could lose lands and title-chasing sighs that led to a locked door and a laughing husband waiting with armed guards. Some poets themselves fell victim to their verses. One famous troubadour confessed that his lady scorned him, yet he lived to serve her anyway, suffering more for each cold glance because pain itself proved his devotion. In these tales, pain became a badge. The more impossible the love, the nobler the heart. To suffer quietly was to rise above mere lust. At least that was the pretty lie poets sold by torchlight. Yet beyond poetry, real passion sometimes broke free. Secret affairs ruined marriages, sparked duels, and even triggered wars when insulted husbands refused to forgive. Lines sung too loudly in the great hall. A knight might risk death in a tourney, hoping a single smile would greet him after victory. A lady might send a token only to regret it when jealous tongues turned silk ribbon into scandal. Not all stories ended in tragedy. Some courtly pairs grew old together, turning youthful poems into gentle laughter shared beside grandchildren. Some young lovers learned restraint using poetry to keep longing alive without destroying their families. Others paid dearly. Banished from court, their songs forbidden, they wandered, as outcasts, proof that in the game of refined desire, one wrong move cost more than blood on a blade. Tonight you see how medieval people dressed passion in silk and verse, to hide the same restless longing found behind village barns and city brothels. Courtly love promised purity, but often delivered heartbreak. Tomorrow, we stand in the shadow of the confessional, where priests asked questions no poet would dare rhyme. There, the church tried to measure sin in whispers and decide what price a kiss behind a chapel door should cost a soul. Sleep now with this thought. Whether in coarse hay or carved marble chambers, desire always finds a voice rough or poetic. It speaks the same truth to every heart, bold enough to listen. Chapter 17, where the confessional knew every bedtime secret. Last night, we drifted through torchlit halls where knights sang of forbidden love and ladies hid secrets behind velvet sleeves. Tonight, we step inside the stone shadow of the church, where passion could not hide behind poetry. Here, every whisper, every kiss, every sigh found its way to one place, the confessional. In medieval Europe, the church was not just a Sunday visit. It ruled daily life from cradle to grave. And in its small wooden box, The confessional priests asked questions. No lover dared speak aloud. Did you touch her hand with desire? Did you visit him at night when the candles were out? Did you lie beside your husband but dream of another man? These questions were not polite curiosities. They were weapons of control. A priest, hearing a village girl confess a single slip, could order days of public penance, kneeling barefoot in church, carrying stones as punishment, paying a fine, or sometimes arranging a forced marriage. If the sin had grown large enough to kick inside her belly, marriage was no escape from the church's eye. Husbands and wives were judged not just for faith, but for how they lay together. Passion too strong, sinful. Position too creative, suspicious. Too frequent, questionable. Too rare. Also suspicious was someone else warming your bed while your spouse prayed alone. Moral manuals survived, revealing how detailed this supervision became. Some priests memorized entire lists of acceptable days for intimacy, never on Sundays. Never on Fridays. Never during Lent or Advent. Not on holy feast days. Not during menstruation. By some calculations, half the calendar was off limits for married beds. One bishop scolded a couple for loving each other more than once a month. He ordered them to pray instead, turning desire into whispered Latin instead of a warm embrace. Did people obey? Many nodded, crossed themselves, and went home to do exactly as they pleased. Confessors knew this too, but the ritual of confession gave them power. They heard secrets kings never learned, sins whispered by peasants and nobles alike, and sometimes used them for influence or protection. A priest could forgive or condemn. He could protect a noble's reputation or ruin a merchant's marriage with a single word. Some did this honestly, believing they saved souls. Others traded secrets for favors, bribes, or the thrill of knowing every bed in the village without ever slipping under the sheets themselves. Even monasteries were not immune. Monks confessed dreams they swore they did not want. Abbots recorded tales of younger brothers caught in sin and punished with exile or silent isolation in cold cells. Yet human nature laughed at holy walls. Where there was confession, there was also repetition. The same sin returned next week, next month, next season, because the heart obeyed no catechism. Some folk found ways to game the system. They confessed the mildest version, paid the smallest penance, and bribed the local priest with eggs or bread to forget the worst of it. Others, too honest or too guilt-ridden, poured out every detail and left the box pale and trembling, fearing hell itself waited if they stumbled again. For the church, controlling bodies meant controlling hearts. A village that feared sin's punishment also feared rebellion. A woman shamed before her neighbors rarely dared defy a father or a husband again. And so the confessional stood silent but mighty, a wooden box hiding more passion and sorrow than any royal bedchamber or secret garden bower. Tonight you see how medieval desire bent under incense and carved stone. Yet never broke entirely. The soul trembled. The lips confessed. But behind the penance lay the same old fire, waiting for the next warm night. Tomorrow, we turn our eyes to the final mystery, how this tangled world of lust, loyalty, herbs, poetry, and sin quietly shaped family lines, village stories, and sometimes entire kingdoms, leaving behind a legacy that still hums in our blood today. Sleep now with this thought. The human heart may whisper its guilt in the dark, but come dawn, it always dares to love again. Confession or not. Chapter 18, where secrets became bloodlines and history. Last night, we sat inside the shadowed confessional, where priests pulled secrets from trembling lips and measured them against holy law. Tonight, we take a step back, wide enough to see how those whispered sins and hidden passions left fingerprints on entire family trees, village gossip, and even the crowns of Europe. For every scandal hushed behind a chapel door, There was a child whose birth blurred the lines between duty and desire. Some noble bastards rose to power, when legitimate heirs died in battle or plague. Some peasants whispered forever that a certain farm boy's bright eyes looked suspiciously like the travelling lord who had once visited his mother's cottage with generous gifts. Medieval society both hated and needed these secrets. Kings feared them because a single rumour could plant doubt in the line of succession. If a queen's child looked too much like a favourite knight or poet, courtiers sharpened their knives with gossip, long before swinging a blade for real. One suspicious birth could undo treaties and start wars. Chroniclers sometimes wrote carefully around the truth, painting illegitimate children as blessed by chance or cursed by scandal, depending on who paid the scribe's wages. Among peasants, such secrets carried less official weight, but no less gossip. A child fathered in a hayloft rather than a marriage bed might never claim land or inheritance. But neighbours remembered. Mothers and grandmothers remembered. Family feuds could last generations over who deserved a plot of soil or a dowry chest. Herbs and cunning midwives played their part. A village healer might help a young girl hide a pregnancy until a hasty wedding could be arranged. Or she might deliver a baby in secret, passing it off to childless kin in another hamlet where no one asked questions. Some babies simply vanished. History rarely records these tiny tragedies. But folk songs do ballads of a girl who walked into the woods alone and never returned. Or of a ghost child crying at the edge of the mill pond, where secrets were drowned with stones tied tight. Yet not every secret child lived in shame. Some rose high, wielding power that made grandfather's sins seem like blessings in disguise. Bastard knights led armies. Bastard daughters married well when beauty and charm bent powerful men to forget old scandals. In royal courts, a clever mother could spin her child's questionable birth into legend, the touch of a saint, the blessing of a hero's blood. To anything to cover what everyone guessed, but never said aloud. Church law tried to keep these lines clean. Illegitimate children could not inherit titles or land unless a king or pope declared them legitimate by special decree. But kings bent rules when convenient. A favoured bastard son could rule more fiercely loyal than a spoiled legitimate heir. Some kingdoms even made it tradition to acknowledge such sons openly, giving them lesser titles, lands at the border, or command of troops, useful pawns kept close. Never quite trusted, but never fully rejected. Village stories grew thicker with each generation. Old women at the hearth whispered, "See that farm? It should belong to her grandson, if not for a slip behind the barn 50 winters ago." Or, "That young lord, his great-grandmother was just a milkmaid until the count visited on a rainy night." These tales wove shame and pride into family identity, reminders that blood never flows purely. Desire always stirs the pot. And sometimes a scandalous night shapes the future more than any wedding vow. Modern historians dig through parish records and royal charters, hunting for truth among deliberate lies. They find scribbled notes in the margins, father uncertain, rumour of seduction, midwife silenced. Each tiny clue a window into how the private shaped the public. Tonight you see that medieval love, forbidden or blessed, hidden or flaunted, did more than stir hearts. It shaped inheritances, shifted borders, seeded wars, and built the tangled thrones of kings and queens whose family trees forked in directions never spoken aloud at court. Tomorrow we gather all these threads, the village secrets, the royal betrayals, the herbal whispers, the prayers, and the gossip. Together, they show us that beneath stone castles and under thatched roofs, humans have always longed, hidden, lied, forgiven, and loved in ways both holy and scandalous. Sleep now with this truth. 1,000 years may pass, yet one stolen kiss can ripple through centuries, carving paths in history books and family bones alike. Chapter 19, where herbs, spells and hope held power over desire. Last night we traced the tangled bloodlines born of secrets whispered in barns and palaces alike. Tonight we kneel beside the village healer's hearth, where a different power worked quietly behind the scenes, the plants, prayers and old charms that shaped how medieval people courted desire, feared it, or tried desperately to control it. Long before modern medicine, folk knew that certain leaves eased pain, certain roots stirred longing, and certain seeds might keep an unwanted belly from swelling. Mothers taught daughters. Old midwives guarded recipes written nowhere but memory. In a world where the church frowned on interfering with God's plan, herbalists tiptoed along the edge of sin and necessity. Too many mouths to feed. A cup of bitter tea, brewed from wild rue or pennyroyal, might keep another baby from coming too soon. Some methods worked. Some did nothing but give hope and a bad taste on the tongue. Yet hope alone was a medicine when choices were few. Men too sought potions when longing failed them. Priests raged against so-called love philters, drinks spiced with herbs and whispered charms, said to rekindle a husband's passion or seduce an unwilling sweetheart. Courts sometimes punished witches for brewing such concoctions, though plenty of nobles slipped them into goblets at feasts, when the candlelight hid guilty hands. Midwives understood bodies in ways priests never did. They delivered babies safely when the village feared both plague and childbirth. They whispered how to bind wounds, stop fevers, and hush a crying womb. This knowledge was power respected, yet feared. Too wise, a woman risked gossip of witchcraft. Some healers found themselves chained and dragged to court when a stillbirth or unexplained sickness demanded a scapegoat, yet families kept visiting them anyway, paying in bread, chickens, or secret coins. Desperation beats fear every time. Beyond herbs, people turned to spoken magic. A charm murmured over a girl's belly, a knot tied in a thread and buried beneath the cottage door to keep wandering lovers faithful. A prayer mixed with Latin and old pagan words forgotten by the priest, but remembered by grandmothers since before the cross, ruled every village square. The church condemned these practices. Bishops called them superstition, the devil's tricks. Yet priests themselves often turned blind eyes when the same midwife delivered a nobleman's legitimate heir after brewing a strong tea to stop the birth from coming too early. Hypocrisy is older than any herb. Some records survive of women, punished harshly for love. Magic. A girl caught burying a charm under her sweetheart's doorstep might be whipped or fined. An older widow caught selling potions to stir a husband's desire could face a church trial. Forced to swear before relics that she consorted with no demons, just the forest and her own hands. Still, they brewed, they whispered, they healed, and when prayers alone failed, it was the old healer's cup that turned fear into fragile hope. In royal courts, too, herbs danced alongside silk and poetry. A noblewoman who could not conceive might secretly drink wild concoctions while publicly parading to church for blessings. A count's mistress might bribe a trusted maid to fetch certain powders to ensure no rival heir complicated her place by his side. Sometimes these hidden arts failed. A child came anyway. A lover wandered, regardless of charms tied under the bed. But sometimes, a simple brew saved a life, easing a mother's pain, softening grief when faith had no words strong enough. Tonight, you see that medieval desire was never ruled by priests alone. It was bent, sometimes softened, by the gentle force of herbs, wise women, and the courage to trust old secrets when new fears knocked at the door. Tomorrow we gather at the village crossroads one last time. There we will stand between church and tavern, crown and cottage, to see how all these tangled truths gossip. Herbs, love, scandal and prayer stitched the medieval heart into something strangely familiar to us even now. Sleep with this thought where human longing stirs. Roots grow, hands work, and old words whisper still in the dark. promising that some secrets live longer than any sermon or crown. Chapter 20, where all roads meet and desire outlives time. Last night we crouched by the village hearth, watching wise hands stir bitter herbs and whisper charms older than the church's tallest tower. Tonight, we stand at the last crossroads where barn doors, castle walls, candlelit poems, red light lanterns, and confessional whispers meet to remind us of a single truth. Medieval love was never simple. Through 20 chapters, we've walked muddy lanes and marble halls alike. We've seen peasants hide stolen kisses behind haystacks, while kings risked wars for secret lovers. We've heard gossip stronger than iron locks, priests poking into beds not their own, and brothels taxed as a necessary sin. So what do we keep from this journey through the tangled sheets and tight-lipped prayers of medieval Europe? First, that passion laughs at rules. It slips under doorways barred by fathers and bishops. It mocks the calendar that says no touch on feast days. It hums through village songs about milkmaids and knights who never stayed faithful yet inspired verses sung long after they turned to dust. Second, that fear and control shaped every desire. A girl risked her belly. A boy risked a father's wrath. A queen risked a crown. Yet risk itself made the secret sweeter. How many village children grew up hearing rumors that they might carry royal blood? How many noble lines trace back, not through holy matrimony, but through a dark barn and a reckless heartbeat? Third, that the body needed more than love. Herbs and potions whispered truths about a world where famine, plague and war lurked behind every hedge. To survive, people bargained not only with kings and priests, but with old women who knew which roots brought sleep and which teas stole babies back into the soil before scandal took root. Finally, that desire binds us all, highborn and lowborn. A monk's dream, a peasant's sigh, a princess's reckless letter hidden in a prayer book. All these echo the same hunger for touch, warmth, comfort, and the brief illusion that tomorrow's troubles can wait one more night. Our modern world likes to laugh at medieval ways. We think them dirty, repressed, superstitious. Yet look around, lovers still hide secrets from prying eyes. We still whisper confessions, bribe silence, sing songs about heartbreak and betrayal. And somewhere, an old woman still brews a secret tea when no doctor's cure can help. If you close your eyes now, you might still hear it, the soft rustle of straw, the hiss of a candle blown out too soon, the hush of a barn door closing behind two fools, daring to love in a world built to punish them for it. So sleep tonight, knowing this under every roof, behind every sermon, inside every palace. Love finds a way to slip free. It defies rules. It creates legends. It ruins reputations. And it stitches human history together, thread by unruly thread, so that centuries later we still pause to wonder, sigh, and sometimes smile. This was medieval love and lust scandalous, tender, desperate, hopeful. If you have enjoyed this long, winding candlelit path through desire's hidden chambers, please like this video, share it, and subscribe to Boring History for Sleep. Here, even the past whispers secrets worth staying awake for. Good night. Dream well, and remember, some secrets are too sweet to confess, even after 1,000 years.